What is going on, everyone, and happy Daytona 500 Day. Welcome to the best seat of the track. I am Jared Haas, and today I am joined by a special guest. He is the editor-in-chief and owner of Frontstretch.com and going to his 15th Daytona 500, Tom Bowles. Tom, how is the excitement there at the 64th Daytona 500?
We are doing this, Jared, at about 9:30 in the morning. It's already packed. I had to go 3 different places for us to do this so we could have enough quiet in the background that I could actually hear you. That's how packed it is already. Sold out crowd. The infield's been amazing all weekend, and truck and Xfinity crowds have been higher than normal. So I expect a fully packed infield today, along with the sold out crowd. It's going to be an amazing atmosphere, and everybody's so positive this weekend. It's really been a great vibe.
Well, like I said, there's a lot of changes that's going on. I mean, this is the first real points-paying race for the next-gen car, obviously, with the duels, paid points. But there's a lot of new going on and not a lot of cars. It's going to be interesting to see with the Daytona 500 with the damaged vehicle policy. We've seen it last year affect Quinn Hoff after debris from a damaged car affected him. And we even saw the truck race last Friday with the 51 truck and the 40 affect cautions with that. So, with my point is, like I said, debris cautions could affect cars that are on track, and there's not a lot of cars to go around in the garage. What is the situation with backup cars here with the teams at the track right now?
So it's been really interesting. Denny Hamlin was joking the other day about the part shortage, and they said, he said, oh, we're going to have it resolved by Phoenix. And people said, oh, Phoenix in the spring, right? Because we're about to go on the West Coast swing. In about a month, the part situation will be resolved. People have more backup cars. He goes, no, Phoenix in November. And that's how seriously people are worried about the supply chain and falling behind. Now, listen, Daytona is its own animal. I think people were kind of, playing coy about the fact they had no backups. Hendrick Motorsports, Team Penske's of the world, you saw Joey Logano crash in the duels. A backup magically appeared, right? But for some of the smaller teams, they're trying to get their feet in the sport. I'm thinking like the Money team, number 50, with Kaz Grala, Jacques Villeneuve's number 27 team. Some of these teams that NASCAR wanted to attract the new ownership, that's where this really affects them because they started with 0 cars and they have very limited crew to try and build these things. Kaz Grala said he got his first chassis 32 days before the Daytona 500. So I feel like this is going to be an issue, Jared, that's going to last for the next at least month or two and really affect some of the smaller teams. Where you might see it is smaller teams not attempting as many races because they just didn't have as many cars. And then all of a sudden their primary gets wiped out in a crash and they have no backup.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, NASCAR is built on these smaller teams getting bigger. And if the smaller team doesn't show up, it's going to affect NASCAR. And to my point is this Daytona 500 has already had some interesting storylines this weekend. We had, obviously, as you mentioned, Kaz Grala and Jacques Villeneuve make the race, but we've also had Greg Biffle with NY Racing, which was the old Extreme Motorsports team, famously known with the car being stolen trailer. What type of, like I said, feeling do these teams have for making the Daytona 500 now?
So you broke up a little bit during that, but you were talking about small teams and, making the Daytona 500 and how that affects their season and how that affects their, bid for not just the season, but, their confidence for the race itself. So, I'll use Kaz as an example. Kaz, this was the best. He was like the most nervous he's ever been for a 500. He's made the 500 before. He made it last year. But after making the big race, he's like, we need to turn the Daytona 150 into the Daytona 500. And for some of these smaller teams, there were only 6 open teams fighting for 4 spots, but they were really geared towards qualifying. And they had the cars, geared up for qualifying. It's a little different setup than the race. And so I think you're going to see a little bit of a struggle for some of these uncharted teams the first 50, 100 laps to get themselves dialed in. Somebody like a Greg Biffle that people may be rooting for, making his first race since November 2016 on the Cup side. I think he'll do well if they could stay on the lead lap the second half. But what these guys need early, some of these underdog teams, they need a lot of cautions so that they can get their cars dialed in. They need something early to make sure they stay on the lead lap and they can really kind of tweak. Otherwise, I see them potentially losing the draft. We've seen with the next-gen cars, they get really spread out. And then they could get themselves in trouble. So I think that's going to be the key for the race. But, of all the uncharted teams that made the field this week, I really think that, Greg Biffle and NY Racing. A lot of people are talking about the money team, Floyd Mayweather, of course, because of his, fame as a boxer. But, NY Racing hadn't been around in a couple of years. They were a team that was notorious for not having money and really coming in and being like an underdog that couldn't perform. It was really big for Biffle to get them in the field, and it's going to really jumpstart their 2022.
Absolutely. It's pretty interesting that, we've actually sat down with Biffle and Shock Villeneuve and Casgralla this weekend too. So, like I said, it's pretty interesting to see some of these drivers that we haven't seen in a while get back into NASCAR, which is a good thing. So, Tom, we're going to turn into our picks of the race, and I want to show our standings real quick. Last weekend, we had Brian Nolan on the show, and he picked Ryan Blaney, and I picked Chase Elliott. Chase Elliott finished ahead of Ryan Blaney at the Clash, so I have a point right now compared to the at-track reporters. With that being said, this Speed Weeks kind of reminds me of the 2000 Daytona 500 Speed Weeks. A lot of single-car drafting and a lot of manufacturer dominance. And actually, an interesting fact that the 2000 Daytona 500 is the last 500 that a manufacturer has swept the top 5, and that was all Fords. And I see that very possibility considering what happened at the duels, with Fords in contention with the top 4, obviously Duel 2 with Logano wrecking out. I could definitely see Fords sweeping the top 5s. They've been performing well in the draft practice and in the race. I'm going to pick with Nolan's pick in the Clash with Ryan Blaney. He's performed well. Got passed late by Keselowski, but I think he can get it done. He's been in position before to win. He almost won in 2020, so we'll see. It's a lot of unpredictability. Tom, who are you picking to win the Daytona 500?
Well, I think your logic is sound. I'm actually going to go with another Ford driver that I feel like has been overlooked all week. And he's not going to say it because he's a man of faith and so optimistic, overly optimistic all the time. I think it's one of his great qualities. And that's Michael McDowell. This is a guy that people thought, he won his 1/500 Cinderella story. He's not going to win again. And this is a guy that has only finished top 3 in the duel, led 2 practice sessions. He and Todd Gilliland have drafted great all week. And we have the unpredictability of the next-gen car. That's going to favor some of the smaller established teams. Note I said established versus some of the guys just coming in like we talked about earlier. And I see McDowell being really competitive throughout the race. And if the Fords continue to work together as strongly as they have been, I don't see any reason why McDowell can't go back to back. I mean, we've seen it before. Sterling Marlin won his first race of his Cup career in 1994, and then he didn't win the rest of the year. People were like, was this a one-hit wonder? All of a sudden he comes in 1995, he wins again and goes back to back and really establishes, a record for the history books for him. So I'm going to go with McDowell.
That is a pretty good pick, too. He's obviously led a lot of practices, won Daytona 500, and got in position to win the 500 last year, too. Tom, it has been a pleasure with you to join us from Daytona 500 weekend. And from everyone here at Frontstretch.com, please like us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and make sure to enjoy the Daytona 500.